Hi all, welcome. Thanks for joining us today to learn a little bit more about Bitnami, a new member of the VMware family. We're going to be talking about modern application development, which is a topic fairly new to the VMware world. We're going to specifically be talking about using Bitnami's chart and container foundations in your applications, whether it's turnkey components like MongoDB and Redis, or foundational components like a Node.js or a Python container that you want to build on top of. We're going to show you how to use GetLab, in our case, to assemble a modern application using those Bitnami foundations and get the benefits of speed and security that we offer in maintaining those foundational components. My name's Matthew Small. I joined VMware with the Bitnami acquisition. Prior to that, I led solutions architecture for them, working with our enterprise customers and cloud partners. I have some cloud management experience going back into the RightScale days as well before that. So I came from the infrastructure view up and into the application world. And this is really mapping to where VMware's journey is going as well, as we continue to move up the stack into useful cloud outcomes. Bitnami's mission before and Bitnami's continued mission under VMware is to make awesome software available to everyone everywhere. And this is obviously not a small mission statement. So how do we go about doing that? Well, over the past decade, what we've actually done is we've built a collection, a curated list of 180 different useful open source applications that developers, that marketing teams, that data scientists need in order to do actual work. And so what we actually do is we provide all of these components, whether it's Node.js, Hadoop, Kafka, RabbitMQ, MongoDB, and a lot of other popular components directly into the cloud marketplaces. So if you go to the AWS Cloud Marketplace today and you type in just about any popular open source component, chances are the first or second result you'll see says certified by Bitnami. This is also true, by the way, in the EKS marketplace in AWS, where you can go and find all of the charts and container foundations specifically optimized for EKS in Amazon. What we also provide is a pipeline of these applications directly to large enterprises. So you may not prefer our version of Debian being under your container, and instead you may use RHEL and tweak your SE Linux configuration like so. So let us put our catalog of applications on top of your golden images as well and help support your modern application builder's journey as you're enabling development teams to assemble from these pieces in a controlled way. We support all the major AWS services and all of the major things that AWS doesn't allow us to say. Actually, a couple more stats. 1,000 releases a month out of our build pipeline. This stuff is installed 1 million times a month and runs over 1.5 billion operational hours per year. So this software and components, they're already in use widely around the world. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the modern apps assembly process, how it's different than how traditional apps have been developed. We're going to give you some tips for accelerating that process and show you some live demos of using CI/CD of Bitnami containers from GetLab. So even back in like 2000, if you were developing an open source, things were still pretty verticalized. You know, there weren't a lot of open source components that were trustworthy enough to incorporate into modern applications, and the stacks were rather homogeneous. And the environments that we ran them on were also rather homogeneous. Obviously today with, Agile and DevOps and microservices trends, those things are becoming more and more and more complex. Multiple cloud components, multiple cloud architectures, maybe you're using first-party services in various environments, and things are just very hard to manage across the board. Also, over the past 10 years, we've got very complex into how we decide what's a good cloud outcome. And so we built all these teams, development teams, security teams, operations teams, and then we try to combine them with DevOps and DevSecOps and SecOps and all of these different combinations, ultimately trying to collaborate on what makes a successful cloud outcome. We built a lot of tools and process and procedure around that in order to make those assurances to ourselves and to our organization that we're doing this successfully and moving our applications into production. And finally, dependency webs have also become increasingly complex. So modern applications are typically assembled from a variety of different source components. Whether it's a community source, you pulled something off of GitHub or Docker Hub. Maybe it's a code snippet that went in from Stack Overflow. Your cloud sources might be a reference architecture that you grab from AWS to start with. A certified source might be a vendor like Red Hat or Bitnami, where you're going to get some certified foundations that meet a minimum standard of compliance. And of course, your private sources, your crown jewels internally, your custom applications, and how you're integrating all of these components into useful pieces for your applications up here. Of course, open source has even more complexity because those open source applications have dependencies on other open source components, and this gets even exponentially more complex behind the scenes. So there's questions that arise. How is this consistent? Is it secure? Is it compliant with what we need? And is this entire process automated when we actually need to update it? It's one thing to get your application developed once. It's a whole other thing to maintain it continuously. Now, XKCD calls this software enlightenment. So how do you take two pieces that you hardly understand and glue them together? You know, they wanted to get an application together, split screen app on a new tablet that showed a live cam and a calendar, realized it was way easier to go buy 2 cheap Android phones on eBay and slap them on a piece of cardboard and call it a day. This is an analogy for Docker. It's a lot of stuff that we don't quite understand what's inside, but we know how to assemble it and put it together. And, you know, just learn how to glue it together. Don't quite understand it. This is one of my favorite comics. And so what organizations have had to do is they've tried to modernize, but modernize safely. And one thing that Amazon did very well is they took the concept of self-service to the extreme. They gave developers all the choice, convenience, and flexibility that they required, and they made it very, very easy. And that's why we saw things like spontaneous IT cropping up around. And then operations is typically playing catch-up, saying, well, hey, you threw this into production, but it's not, you know, compliant with our CIS benchmark standards, or it doesn't have the visibility through our centralized logging and monitoring tooling. How do we collaborate and do this better? And so this balance we've been calling cloud governance. And where we really focus our efforts at Bitnami is to help these teams offer a superior self-service experience to these teams. Because these developers don't want to go straight to Amazon and then have to build all of the other things on top that operations want, when instead they could go to a central repository that operations might want to find the things that's already pre-prescribed for what they need. And if it's not there, then at least they can have a conversation about that, rather than packaging a bunch of undifferentiated code and doing a bunch of work that's not necessarily required. And so one consideration you can have is to, you know, move towards more immutable image-based deployments. Obviously, we have to do that with containers, and we're going to show some examples today. But if you're not quite there yet and you're walking up this immutability staircase, you know, you might be starting with getting your base golden OS in place. You know, you go to Red Hat, you grab the image, you tweak it, and now you want to institute that standard. Maybe you're doing dynamic configuration management, and so you bundle in that Chef agent, you know, that Chef client, so that it can talk to your Chef server in a consistent way, and you distribute that as a new golden foundation. Bitnami apps are kind of that next jump up this ladder here, where we're already adding a lot of the common applications, runtimes, and frameworks for you. So you don't actually have to go through the work of packaging that undifferentiated open source code from upstream, spending the time and compute resources to do it and maintain it. And this is where we come in. And then, of course, when you add your configurations and customizations on top, you're basically container ready. Furthermore, we have collaboration that's happening around the cloud services and the deployment templates that are required to deliver these things. So, you know, everybody's got their great ideas of what makes a successful cloud outcome. And what we can do is, once we've come up with those great ideas, we can start codifying that into our pipelines. Make sure it's the great ideas that you're codifying, not the bad ideas. And the end result of those pipelines would spit out something that represents the collaboration of the team. Everybody's expertise on the base OS and the application and runtime and the deployment template and the cloud services that it's going to use when it's deployed. And so we can use that deployment almost as a package of packages. You know, the images, it wraps around our images and also gives us a cloud-native feel for deploying it. Today we're going to look at Helm for that deployment template, but this can, you know, factor into your CloudFormation or other deployment templates as well. And the final bit is to make sure that that template or those artifacts are secured all the way down to the point of consumption. So, you know, it might land and get created in a central repo, but your CI/CD pipelines are grabbing it. You might be offering it through a self-service catalog for, you know, data scientists to point and click and provision an application. You might have downstream repos connected to local machines and other components. Make sure you're signing these artifacts through the process so that you know where they're going. This is one of the biggest challenges in an immutable image-based infrastructure, is keeping track of where those images were deployed so you know when they need to be updated. So let's look at a modern example of an application. I'm going to set it up here, and then we're going to pop over into GitLab and go through the process. So our application creates a fitness website, and it's a modern app with you know, multi-tier, multi-factor app here. We are building on a mini Deb foundation. This is a stripped-down version of Debian that Bitnami actually maintains to, you know, make Debian a bit slimmer down for the catalog that we offer for free in the community. On top of that, we package all of our stuff. In our example here, we're going to use MongoDB and we're going to use Redis. We consider these turnkey components because there's really not, you don't have to crack the thing open and make a lot of modifications. Point your password, you know, point your application, give it the password, and you can use that component turnkey. We also offer foundational components. So I have 2 Go services here, that's what those are. And then we also offer foundational components like Node and Python. And so on top of the Bitnami node and the Bitnami Python containers, we are going to add, using GitLab, our code on top. And so if we look at the cart in the order here, we're pulling everything from Bitnami Python or from Bitnami node. And so here at the top, these are the circles of hell that Bitnami is dealing with for you. We are maintaining the underlying operating system and all of the packages that are coming out through that channel. We are maintaining the Docker file and the consistency with the latest releases for Python to ensure that those are always up to date and secure. And then that way you can just focus on the CI/CD elements for your application and building on top of those. We are going to wrap the whole thing in a Helm chart, and we're going to use Helm to deploy it in a continuous deployment fashion. So let's do it. So here's my GitLab environment. We, of course, launched this GitLab instance from a Bitnami VM. This is a turnkey VM. Launched it in AWS, and now we're doing Kubernetes containerization on top of this GitLab VM. We do VMs, we do containers, we do any format you can really imagine. So we've got here our pipeline. What I want to show first is just if I look for Bitnami in here, you'll start to see where those from statements are and where those turnkey components are being used. So here we're pulling from in our cart Docker file that Bitnami Python container. Now, you might choose to use our community catalog just like this. That's going to be the spec that we have, general purpose, out there freely available. It might be what we call Project Galleon, delivering a built-to-spec component to your private repository that you're pulling from. So a Bitnami Python container that's already on your golden image that you build everything on, for example. We've got a couple other mentions down here, and then down here at the bottom you see a couple examples of just using the Helm chart to pull in those turnkey containers. So Redis, MongoDB, passing in input variables that are the passwords to get those things going, other configuration information from the deployment template. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make, here's my application here. Oh, Zoom gets out of the way. Here's my application here, and you know, modern app, but you know, basic app here. What we're going to do is we're going to make a very visual change, and we're going to watch GitLab do its thing. So, you know, right here it says free returns for 2 months, but I'm not feeling so charitable anymore. So, you know, I'm going to go down to, you know, this is just editing some HTML here, but I'm going to go down and I'm going to say, yeah, it's going to be free returns for 1 month. So after I made that change, commit that change, I'm just using the GitLab web IDE here. So 1 month returns. And I'll do my commit. So everything's committed now. And this is where the magic, demo gods permitting, will start to happen. So what we should see now is that in our CI/CD pipelines that we've got set up, there's our latest pipeline that's already kicked into action. Let's take a look closer. So what we have in here is a process that was initialized by our git commit. It's now building the containers for our application, going through that process. It's going to push those containers to our container repository, and then it's going to wrap the whole thing in a Helm chart, so we have one simple deployment template that we can use to recreate this application. So we're letting it do its thing. It's churning through. And this really gives us an opportunity to, obviously you can tune this how you want this tuned. You may not build your entire app every time. We're just kind of showing the art of the possible here with all of the component pieces. But once it's finished, which it just has, we refresh our application running in EKS, now we're just offering 1-month returns. So quick, easy change, triggered from Git, fully automated through the pipeline. And it was pulling from all of those Bitnami foundations, which I just didn't even have to think about. So the next thing that I also want to just give you a sense of is how we operate within other types of environments where you might need to give developers access to discover what's available in the first place. So one easy way to do that is to provide an IT vending machine. A self-service catalog of pre-approved components works well in your organization that users can use. These could be the DevOps tools that they need. Maybe you're offering a central repository where they can go grab Jenkins and GitLab and any other component they need. Or maybe it's just, they're looking for a component piece. So what we might suggest there is, create that vending machine and create the vending machine where customers are going to go to actually consume those services. So if that's an AWS proper, this is all of these components in a self-service UI within AWS's service catalog. Completely self-service deployment policies for CloudFormation template. If you're in Kubernetes, you might decide to use something like CubeApps. CubeApps is an open source project maintained by Bitnami, and it provides that self-service experience within a cluster. So this particular environment is running in an EKS cluster. And CubeApps is installed here. And so these are my applications that are running. I'm running Airflow, which I launched a little earlier. It's fully up to date. I'm running Drupal, which I launched a while ago, and it is now out of date. It's letting me know that. And I can go in and update that. But before I do that, I just want to give you a sense of this catalog in general. Because here again, what we're doing is we're connecting the discovery experience of useful software to the deployment experience. And so if I need a new piece of software, let's say I want to test with a Cassandra database here, I can just pop through this UI and come through and deploy that for myself. Here again is how you can see Bitnami doing all the work of keeping these artifacts up to date and providing that continuous stream of updates. This onus would be on you if you're looking to provide these centralized platform services to your internal users. You can shift that onus to Bitnami in order to provide that as a service. So we'll go through, we'll deploy our Cassandra. This is the values.yaml here. I'm not going to make any changes to that, but I'm just going to go ahead and hit submit. And so what this does is it actually provisions us the entire stack for Cassandra. It even does some cool stuff like secrets management. It's going to generate a password for us and apply that as part of the reference architecture. So what Bitnami's done here is we've actually optimized all of these applications for that quick get-it-run moment. And we've continuously provided that stream of updates so that Cassandra artifacts never get out of date within your organization. Whatever tools, process, procedures you use to then deploy those artifacts, to maintain those artifacts, whether it's a CI/CD process like you saw today or a point-and-click process like this, you have the ability to then always make sure you've got the latest releases and you're providing those foundations in a secure and consistent fashion. The final thing I'll just mention is if you're using PKS, you can also, Pivotal Kubernetes Service, you can also find PKS optimized versions of this, even if it's in AWS, in the VMware Cloud Marketplace. If you go to the AWS Cloud Marketplace, you'll find all of our stuff in the EKS section or in the AMI and CloudFormation template sections. You can also go to the VMware Marketplace for PKS, or if you're doing VMC on AWS or any other combination, take a look at the VMware Cloud Marketplace. If you're using others, take a look in their marketplaces as well. You'll find the same consistent Bitnami foundations across others too. So I just want to say thank you all for taking some time. We do have a booth, obviously, here. We're also over in the main expo hall, Station 12, if you come by. Would love to show you Bitnami's Project Galleon as well in more depth if you're an enterprise looking to provide these internal services. If you'd like to get in touch and talk about your use case, we'd love it. But I'll open it up for any questions. Either I explained everything or you're thinking about something else. So thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. I'll be here for a little bit if you want to come up and chat. I'd also like to point out Gus Lees right here. Gus is prior Bitnamier and now on the EKS team. So if you want to drill in super deep on EKS, this guy created CubeApps and has got a lot of experience there. So thank you all again, and looking forward to working with you.